Lucky Daye's Candydrip, 17 songs, 57 minutes long, and 37 seconds long. Lucky Daye is pretty great. He's been one of those like artists I've been saying has been pushing forward and bringing funk back, so to speak. We talked
Yeah,
about I want to say we talked about his album Painted in
and Table for
2019.
Two.
Yeah. We may or may not have done Table for Two, but I know we definitely did Painted. It was
Pretty
like a music
sure we did
recommendation for
Table for
me.
Two. I remember listening to Table for Two for sure.
Oh, I totally do remember it. It was very, very because it was such a
It
short
was
drop. It was really
so
quick,
short.
and
Yeah.
it was very like it featured a lot of. I do remember this. I'm looking through the features here. I remember thinking that the features were a really nice pairing along with Lucky Daye, but it was just felt like the quintessential drop to me. Like I almost
Yeah, yeah.
forgot about the release. I'm a Lucky Daye head a little bit in a music reviewer, so like I remember it vaguely, but like it there's a reason Painted has a deluxe edition and Table for Two does not. Let's say that, right?
Yeah.
But Candydrip would be that second project there, and there's always that sophomore album slump, so to speak, that artists have to overcome. And while I won't say that this is like a knock it out of the park kind of record, like we've reviewed a couple of this week or very recently, this is still a very good outing from one of like the vanguards of bringing funk back, so to speak, or funk is
Mm.
basically already here at this point. There's no reason to have that take anymore. But and keeping that sound going and keeping it sound fresh, also not too nostalgic like Silk Sonic, which is like trying to be almost a carbon copy of that era, but adding some newer production styles, some indie tones to really like push it forward.
Yeah. Um, and with like the beginning of Candydrip, like you get some. I think it starts off on the right foot. You have like intro and interlude, then you have Goodbye featuring Smino, or Smino. I don't know how to say that name, but I think it's actually a pretty good track to start off because it's you get like this solid neo pop mixed with a little bit of funk and some other tribes and stuff that are pretty good. You have Feels Like, which is more of like your pop track, which is interesting to have it right after. And you have NWA featuring Lil Durk, which is like combining trap with the last two tracks. So it's really interesting the way it's done. It's like trap with neo pop and a little bit of like funk in the background with some of the way it pauses, and it has a little bit of it here or there. Um, this is very interesting for the first three tracks to start off the record with. I don't know if I would exactly put those three to four tracks together really next time, but nonetheless, uh, starts it off relatively well. You have Guess, which is like the slower track, which I really like this track a lot, or like a
Right,
neo pop track.
right before that, I don't know if we talked about it that much, but I think, and this goes into it, but I liked NWA before that as well because it was you're making like a little Lucky Day funk kind of track, but you feature
So you
Lil
add in
Durk
trap.
like rapping over it. Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
really good
it's
blending. That's
interesting.
like, yeah, that I would. I mean, yeah, interesting. I I think that like wouldn't work in every kind of track, but it makes it sound very like neo poppy, like neo soul in that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
I thought
That's why I said it
I really
was
liked
an
it.
interesting way to start the album with those three to four tracks, because NWA is like a combination of all of those of of God Body feels like Yes, plus adding trap on top of it. So it's like, oh,
Yeah,
this is very interesting the way that it's done and layered up. Again, I don't know if I would necessarily want to put those all together, those with that, because it's just a lot of different eclectic sounds. But regardless, they do go well together in that way. Like it
yeah.
does have a theme, it does have a motif that does want like tell the way he wants to push through. But yeah, I'm not saying they're bad at all. No, I enjoy them. It's just I remember the first time I was listening to it, like, well, this is a lot of different sounds.
Yeah,
Um,
I
kind of like
would.
Rosalia's record too, but
Yeah, I feel like Rosalia had a lot more cohesion with it, and I
exactly.
felt like God by like I like Smino generally. I felt like it was a little bit underwhelming, and I'm not sure if that was like partially maybe due to placement within the project, but partially I think there's just like a little more like NWA had like a little bit of like liveliness into a groove to it.
Oh yeah, no,
I feel
yeah,
like
for
God
sure.
Body needs a little bit more of that flair somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I cut you off when you were talking about the guess, which is track 5.
Oh no, Guess is might be my favorite track on the record. I really like it. I love like the way it's like a solid neo pop track, but with like a lot of different modern influences. So it brings it up into 2022, and I really like it. which for me to like it is saying a lot because normally I don't like these tracks, but I enjoyed this one a lot. And then
Yeah.
after that, you have a Candydrip interlude, and then the actual title track, Candydrip, which I like. It's just I feel like in the middle it slows down that little too much for the record. Where like that's why I had I guess, an issue with the way the top half of the record was made because that middle half it needs to be spaced a little differently so it doesn't just kind of lull the record out too much because there's a lot of good things on here. But I guess that'd be my biggest criticism. Is that it's just the way that they were placed because I actually really like this record more when I put it on shuffle and I just shuffled the tracks.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. When I shuffled this record, I enjoyed that listening experience because
Mm-hmm.
it the album is unfortunately a little bit top heavy. And again, that
For
sucks. I
sure.
feel like it's another placement thing that makes me not appreciate the child feature enough in
It's
song
like, 'cause
12.
that's my thing. I freaking loved that track, Compassion featuring Child. As I always like to say whenever we review Child on Audioface. I love that track. I also love Fever and Used to Be towards the end of the record as well. But those ones, like, because of the way that everything is placed, that top heaviness just it holds way too much value. So then when you get down towards the end of the record, you're just worn out a little bit. It just fizzles out that spark that you had at the beginning. And when I shuffled it, I was able to get into some of these tracks a little bit more too. But overall, as a project, I think it's good. There's a lot of interesting motifs that I really like with this record. Like there's example, I think NWA is a really cool song. I really like Fever, where you're having like that solid neo pop, but you're mixing in a little bit of funk, a little bit of soul, a little bit of trap and B in there too. So you're doing a lot of different things where you're playing with a lot of sounds that are very popular, or very modernized the past 3 4 years, but you're adding your own flair to it and pushing it a little bit further, pushing that envelope a little bit further. Like only critique is just the placement of these tracks, and even like might have been able to get rid of one or two tracks too, or just if you place it, it would have placed it differently. You might have even liked those tracks a little bit more, but
Yeah,
overall, I think
I
it's
feel
a
like
decent project.
the title track should have been lower, and Ego I think
Mm-hmm.
is a fairly solid album ender, but like it's literally like solid. I feel like it like delivers in that thing, but there's definitely like it's not that like out of the park album ender that's I'm gonna remember and go like,
Yeah.
wow, this is crazy inspiring. Even the Rosalia album that we did or this week that we really liked didn't have the most phenomenal album ender, but
It was still
um
good.
it like this finishes the project very well. I think Ego finishes the project very well. And
Good.
so overall, solid project. The second album is very tough because you're not surprising
It's
us with your sound
hard.
anymore, and you've got to like figure out what your next thing is or what your thing is you're doing right
Hmm.
now. So, um,
As
it's
Robin Pecknold of Fleet Foxes says, I am very thankful I will never have to make a second album ever again in my life. Because it's hard. It's such a big pressure. It's example, yeah, you never know what you're gonna get. You never know like what you're supposed to do, what direction you want to go to yourself, your fans, the production, the record label, all of that. So it's a lot of a million external pressures. But I think for a second record, I think it's a step in the right direction. There's still a lot of things I would like a Lucky Day to make better, like to edit, I should say. And yeah, but I think there's a lot of good things in here.
I agree. We didn't arbitrary scale this, did we? We haven't yet.
We have not yet.
Arbitrary scales every week on Audioface because our review is our review, and if we actually gave it a ranking system, that would make less sense than giving it the arbitrary scale of things that YouTube commentator Tim Pool just learned today. Um, this is going to be this is, this is going to be that when you drive a car, you need to put the parking brake on if you're on a hill.
This is him learning that auto start stop works, and he thought that he has to. He takes his car back to the dealership and says, "You sold me a lemon. Why does my car turn off all the time?" You're like, "It's auto start stop." It's like, "What's auto start stop?" Your car stops at red lights or stop signs to save you petrol. Wait, that's a thing? Yes.
This is Tim Pool discovering the left swipe on Tinder is no. He thought that was yes the whole time.